Strymon Big Sky style shimmer in Ableton Live. Shimmer is a really popular effect for worship keys players. For a long time, this pedal was the best way to get it. Now there's lots of plugins on the market, varying price and quality, that can give you a shimmer effect. But if you want a shimmer effect in Ableton Live, you don't have to buy anything else. In this video, you're gonna learn how to use stock plugins, a few hacks and tips that will help you dial in your very own shimmer effect without having to buy anything else. Now, there are a couple of specific steps you need to know, and we're sort of leveraging or hacking some of the plugins to do stuff they weren't necessarily designed to do to get this effect, but the end result is a great shimmer effect that didn't cost you an extra dime. And because you dial it in yourself, you're gonna understand how it works, and you can dial it in to specifically meet the needs of your own sound. So, I love this guy, it's an awesome pedal, but let's set it to the side. I'm gonna show you how to design your own shimmer reverb effect in Ableton Live. Let's get started. So, I'm using Ableton Live 10 Suite for this demo, but everything I'm gonna teach you is the same in Ableton Live 10, Ableton Live 11, Ableton Live 9, Intro, Standard, Suite. You're gonna be able to find all these plugins and use them in the exact same way. The first thing we need is a sound to use. I'm using one of our free patches of the week. At Sunday Sounds, we give away a brand new free Ableton Live worship patch every single Wednesday. All you have to do is subscribe to our newsletter and you'll automatically get that patch in your inbox. This one's called the Aggressive Polysynth. It sounds like this. There's hundreds of free Ableton Live patches that you get when you sign up for our newsletter. So there's a link in the description. If you'd like to, you can actually start with this sound yourself as well and build this shimmer effect right along with me. So I've just got a blank Ableton Live set open and I've added this sound in. First thing I'm gonna do is take the reverb out of this sound using the macro here and then bring the filter frequency down a little bit. And then I'm also gonna take out a little bit of the attack. Just have this function a little bit more as a pad. Okay, now we're gonna create our shimmer effect. You could do this inside of an audio effect rack on an individual track if you wanted to. I recommend actually creating a return track and using this as an aux bus, creating a shimmer bus that you can send any individual sound or track into. So then you've only got one instance of that shimmer effect. You can create it and then run any sound you want to into that bus at any time. So I'm gonna go up here in the menu, going to create a return track. I'm gonna rename this one Shimmer. Now, if we wanted to do this in an organized way, the first thing I would recommend doing is creating an audio effect track. And we're just gonna name this Shimmer Effect. Then we wanna send our signal from the track into this shimmer bus. And I'm gonna solo this bus so we only hear the return track for a while, so we can really focus on the shimmer sound itself. So because there's no effects here, it just sounds like the regular sound. Now there's a couple really important ingredients, and the order you add them in is really important. So make sure you watch this in order, because if you do this out of order, you're gonna get some weird effects. It's not gonna sound quite natural. Like I said earlier, we're sort of treating a couple of these effects to do things they weren't necessarily intended to do, and that's how we arrive at this shimmer effect. Honestly, for a long time, I wasn't sure if it was quite possible to get a great shimmer bus sound in Ableton Live without buying a plugin like Valhalla or something, but it turns out that it's possible. The first ingredient is a reverb effect that we're going to use to just wash everything out. So I'm going to bring in the reverb effect here. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is bring up the decay time to several seconds long. And then it's also a good idea to bring in some chorus modulation, somewhere between 0.5 and maybe 1.3 or 1.4 hertz. And then bring the scale all the way up and the density all the way up as well, because we want a really big sounding reverb that's a little bit darker. We want it to last a really long time. I'm also going to turn off the high cut and bring the pre-delay all the way down to the lowest number it can go. I'll explain why in a little bit. For now, we just want to wash everything out. And I'm also going to bring the volume of the reflectivity and the diffusion all the way up, because as things go through this bus, it's going to lose some volume as an effect of what we're going to do. So we want to have a strong signal going through this bus. Okay, now next up is the first sort of hack or special ingredient that makes this effect possible. If you're watching this video, if you're an Ableton Live user, and this is helpful so far, please give this video a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel because we put out new worship keys and Ableton Live sound design tutorials all the time. So this next ingredient is the key to making this effect work. You ready? It's the grain delay effect. Grain delay is sort of a weird effect in Ableton Live. It's sort of meant for, I think, a lot of glitchy electronic music. You can get some really cool sounds with it, but a lot of like spaceship, alien kind of sounds as well. So for worship keys players, oftentimes we don't really think about the grain delay effect much. And honestly, I think that makes sense for most of our applications. But for us here, when we're sort of trying to hack together a shimmer effect, there's one particular thing that grain delay brings to the table that no other stock Ableton Live audio effect does: pitch shifting. The ingredients or the steps of the signal flow for a good shimmer reverb effect are something washing out the signal, so a reverb effect up front, something pitch shifting the signal up. For us, that's the grain delay, and then we're going to do some more stuff in just a minute to further sort of dial in the sound. That's really important, but we have to address the grain delay first. So what grain delay does, and I'm going to turn off the reverb effect for a second so we can really focus on dialing in the grain delay. It's a delay effect, but it can also do lots of mangling to the delay signal specifically. So here it is on its own. It's not really doing anything so far other than delaying the signal. So we have to do some stuff here to bring this into a pitch effect. The first thing we're going to do is with the pitch section here, we're going to bring it all the way up to 12. That's taking the whole sound up an entire octave. Now that sounds really bad, right? But we are pitch shifting, so now we actually have to just use the grain delay in ways it wasn't intended to dial this sound in. The first thing we're going to do is bring down the frequency. And there's a sort of sweet spot here between 3 Hertz and maybe 6 or 7 Hertz, where it's actually somewhat an accurate representation of an octave up of the original pitch. So this is where we're at. The effect is on. Now it's still really nasty, right? So we're going to bring up the spray parameter. And this adds random delay time changes that sort of washes everything out, so all of that little glitchiness isn't happening all at once. Because this is grain delay, it's a very glitchy pitch shifting effect, and that's not really what we want for a nice pure sort of crystalline shimmer reverb effect. So increasing the amount of spray really helps. Then if we want to, we can increase the random pitch parameter just a little bit. This adds sort of what sounds like chorus modulation to that shimmer effect. This is further sort of washing out and softening the pitch shifting. Now, the other thing we're going to do is turn off the sync effect, and we can dial in the time of the repeats in milliseconds. The reason we want to do this is because as the tempo of the Ableton Live set changes, we don't want the character of the shimmer reverb to be affected at all. So it's important to turn off sync mode and dial in the millisecond value. So you can play with different values here. I find that typically a greater value sounds maybe a little more musical. It does have more of that bloom effect. If you go too short, then you notice those glitches, you get some of that thumping as the sound initially happens. So I recommend a value around 100 milliseconds. Now we're going to bring in the feedback. This is something that you can do to taste. Most shimmer effects, including on the Big Sky and most plugins, have the ability to loop the effect through the pitch shifting more than once. And that's what this feedback effect is going to do. It's going to take a percentage of the pitch shifted signal, and then it's going to pitch shift it again over and over in these cascading octaves. So you want to do this very tastefully, and sometimes it's not even the effect you want at all. Here it is without, and here it is with a little bit of feedback. You can hear those extra octaves sort of up above. So personally, I think this is pretty cool. I like the effect, so I'm going to bring it up to about 28. Then the last thing we're going to do is bring the dry wet mix down. This is something that you need to do to taste, but I think it's important that you don't go 100% on this. Makes the effect a little bit more subtle. Now we're going to bring this reverb effect back in, and we're going to start to really feel like we're making some progress in making this useful in a musical context. So even here, this is a pretty cool sound. We can definitely hear that shimmer, that octave up happening in sort of a rhythmic sense. That's because we're using grain delay, which is a time-based effect to generate those octaves. So the third ingredient, this is sort of what glues everything together. Quite simply, we're just going to wash stuff out again by adding another instance of reverb after the grain delay. Now again, you can do this to taste. I'm going to just really quickly ratchet in some settings. I'm going to add some more modulation here, but a little bit slower. Again, we're going to crank the volume up, and I am going to bring up the decay time. This is where you really have a lot of control over how much space and how prominent this shimmer effect is. You can use the EQ of the input processing to dial out any problematic frequencies. For example, it's not a bad idea to cut the lows here on the second reverb, because sometimes that grain delay can introduce some low artifacts as that pitch shifting is happening. You definitely don't want low-end thump coming through your shimmer effect. You can use the diffusion network's EQ here to sort of dial in how bright and airy that shimmer effect is. And if you want, you can also play with the size here. It goes super massive for the end result shimmer effect. Now, here again, I recommend bringing the pre-delay all the way down to 0 for both of these effects. And the reason is the grain delay is introducing latency to the signal, at least as far as the wet signal is concerned. So I like that dry signal happening very immediately, and then the wet signal is going to be delayed by this time value that you set here. So almost 100 milliseconds of latency for the shimmer effect. But because it's washed out afterwards, it gives it that characteristic shimmer bloom feel that's actually exactly what we're going for. Now, this is a usable shimmer effect, but two more things that you can do to dial this in to another level and give you a lot of control over how this works. These two ingredients are really important, but sort of easy to ignore. Once you start feeling like, oh, this sounds like shimmer, I'm good to go, I'd encourage you not to just stop there. Give yourself a little bit more to take this to another level. The first thing, we're going to introduce a delay effect. Now, I'm in Suite, so I see this delay plugin, but you can use the simple delay plugin or the ping pong delay if you're using Ableton Live Intro, even if you're using Ableton Live Lite. So all I want here is two delays that aren't at the same subdivision and a moderate amount of feedback. I'm going to bring out all of the highs. When you run it through a delay that's in stereo like this one, it's going to move that modulation back and forth in the stereo field over time. It just makes everything feel a little bit more glued together. So for comparison's sake, here it is with the delay off. It's a little bit more direct. Maybe that's what you want. If you bring that delay in, now you really don't notice any rhythmic elements of that pitch shifted signal. It's just blooming and then just cascading and hanging, which is really nice. So if you wanted to give yourself some flexibility here, you could actually create a macro up in your audio effect rack, and you can map it to the dry wet mix of the delay. You could also map to the amount of the grain delay, the dry wet mix of the grain delay. If you wanted to make it more intense, you could go all the way up and just hear that shimmer. Or you could bring it down if you wanted it to be a little bit more subtle. To replicate sort of the original shimmer reverb sound that a lot of us are probably chasing, maybe you if you're watching this video, I think you want that dry wet mix somewhere in the middle. Now, I mentioned two things. I've only talked to you about one. Adding the delay to me glues everything together really nicely. The last thing I think is really worth doing that's easy to ignore is adding an EQ effect at the very end. Now, if you're in Standard or Suite, you could use EQ8, which gives you lots of control. If you're in Ableton Live Intro, then you could get by with just the EQ3 plugin. Here is where you can really spend just a couple of seconds making sure the Shimmer Reverb is doing what you need it to do. So very simple changes here can totally change the character of the shimmer. So if I take out the mids, all that space frees up and I'm still hearing that shimmer on top, which is really cool. Sometimes that's what you want. Sometimes you want that sort of shimmer to hit in the mids. You can bring out the lows entirely. And I can adjust where that happens here. And then I could also tame the highs if I needed to. If it was maybe a little bit too bright. Again, these are things that you should consider putting on a macro at the top of your instrument rack so you can make really quick, simple adjustments to dial in the sound. But it's so easy to ignore this kind of change because you've got the shimmer, it's feeling good, it's feeling big, and you're like, okay, let's start using this. But these simple sort of guardrails around the sound are a really important step to take. So adding in that delay to diffuse everything out, and then adding in some EQ to make sure you're always in control of the shimmer effect are the important steps that you absolutely should not skip. We are not done yet because I want to show you how you can actually use this in a context for live performance, because so far we've actually just soloed the shimmer effect, right? So here's the shimmer effect. Let me turn off solo, and now we're blending this in with the original sound. So now I can control the prominence of that shimmer effect with the send amount. So I can make it very subtle, and I can fade it in. And if you find that the usable range of this shimmer bus is that only at very high values do you actually get enough signal, then you could just increase the volume of the chain. If you still need more, you could add an instance of the utility plugin first in the chain, and you could boost the signal a little bit more. Just watch out for clipping. You don't want to push things too far. Now I'm able to, even at lower values, still have control and a usable range of sweep for that shimmer effect. Oftentimes you just want a little bit sort of hovering under the surface. So now that I've got this effect dialed in, I could go ahead and minimize these if I wanted to. Like I said, I recommend mapping some macros to this effect. And if I wanted to, I could just hit save here and save it to my user library. Then I could add this effect onto any individual track, any instrument rack, or I could always create a return track in whatever Ableton Live sets I'm working in. But now, let me show you what this effect sounds like on a couple of different sounds, because I've just used this one polysynth so far, but I want you to get an idea of how it sounds on other instruments as well. So let me bring in this organ pad. These are all free patches of the week that we have available for Ableton Live, by the way. I mentioned earlier in the video, if you want to download all these patches and get a new free patch every Wednesday, click the link in the description to join our newsletter. This is a big organ sound. It's on its own. Pretty aggressive. Can bring that drive down. Bring the filter frequency down. Can increase the attack time. So now this is functionally like a dark pad. And if we bring in this shimmer effect, it takes it to a whole different space. This is one of the secrets of dialing in great worship pad sounds that are both dark and warm and bright at the same time. Your original signal doesn't have that high frequency content. It's being generated by the shimmer. It lets you have control over the original sound entirely, but also have that sort of reverberant, bright, ethereal thing happening in the background. And having it on a bus like this is a great way to have control over that. Let's bring in another sound. This is sister patch to that. This is a pad. The great thing about shimmer is even as your sound gets brighter, that shimmer effect just sort of naturally follows along. Let me show you one more example sound. This is the symphony pad. And this one especially I love with this little bit of shimmer effect. And again, with Shimmer Reverb, that main sound can go really dark. So this to me is sort of the quintessential warm worship pad sound. Really subtle, and that shimmer is just sitting in the background really, really nicely. Following along with everything that's done, not getting in the way, but adding that ambience above everything else. This is why Shimmer Reverb, I think, does deserve to be used to the point of cliche in a lot of worship music, because it does something that not really any other effect does, especially for a pad sound like this one. So, we talked about how to create a Shimmer Reverb. The ingredients are reverb to diffuse everything out. We're going to use the grain delay to pitch shift up the signal, paying a lot of attention to how we're dialing in that sound. Then you want to wash that out again with another reverb effect, recommend setting your pre-delay to 0 or as close to 0 as possible so the grain delay's latency doesn't make everything last way too long. Then there's 2 ingredients that are really important, I think, that take the Shimmer effect to the next level, make it really usable. Adding some delay to spread everything out in the stereo field, remove every sense that the grain delay is a time-based effect, and then at the end, add some EQ so you can further sculpt and dial in that Shimmer reverb. Shimmer's great, but too much of it can totally ruin the mix. It could be too muddy, or it could be too bright or shrill, so you really want to have control over where it sits in the sonic space. Recommend mapping a couple macros and saving it as an audio effect rack. Then you can use it in any set as you're preparing. You can add it to any instrument rack. And you didn't have to buy a Big Sky. You didn't have to buy any third-party plugins to get this effect. Now, if you've watched this video and you're going to try this yourself, go ahead and download the free patches that we have available via the link in the description. So then you'll actually be hearing the exact same sounds. You can really dial in this Shimmer effect. And then you can take ownership of it and dial it in even further for the specific sounds that you want to use. If you want something that's done for you, check out our Sunday Keys template for Ableton Live. Sunday Keys is a huge collection of ready-to-play worship sounds. You've got custom pianos, pads, synths, leads, arps, organs, strings. Any sound you'll need for modern worship music is going to be inside of Sunday Keys. Plus, we've designed workflows and a visual template that make it easy for you to do sound design, to find ready-to-play patches, and it comes with an amazing Shimmer effect that's available on all the pads that sounds awesome. It's ready to go. So if the sounds you heard in this video resonate with you, but you don't necessarily want to tackle the sound design that I just demonstrated, check out Sunday Keys via the link in the description of this video. Give this video a thumbs up. That helps it show up for more people. We really appreciate that support. Leave a comment and let us know if you have questions about creating Shimmer effects inside of Ableton Live. And also let us know what tutorials you'd like to see us tackle next in Ableton Live specifically. Thanks for watching this video. Have a great day.